Hello and welcome to the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. Bears training camp is underway. Caleb Williams and the Bears have been out on the practice field for nearly a week now. They put on the full pads tomorrow, Friday. That's July 26th. There's a preseason game in a week. We're here to break it all down for you. I'm Sean Hammond, the Chicago Bears beat writer for ShawLocal.com. Find all our coverage at ShawLocal.com. Joining me, as always, is my teammate, Michael Dwojak. Michael, what's up?
Not much. Good to, we're a weekend here now. Good. I feel like everyone's kind of ready for the pads to come on. I feel like that was the common theme of Bears training camp this week from both the players, the coaches, and the reporters. So it's good that we're taking the next step as a whole group here.
Yeah, look, the first couple of days of training camp are kind of an extension of OTAs where you're ramping up especially like those first couple practices were maybe an hour long, if that, right. It's ramping up in intensity with both length of practice. The pads are coming on Friday. It's going to get a little bit more serious. We can actually maybe get an idea of what's going on in the trenches with the offensive and defensive lines. Right. And so while it's certainly it's exciting when things first start and it's fun and we can read into a little bit here and there, we're really going to learn a lot in the next couple of days and weeks. But yeah, we've gotten a chance to see Caleb Williams. We've gotten a chance to see really all these guys. From on the injury front, there's not a whole lot injury wise that really concerns you. Karana Magaji, the rookie tackle, has yet to practice, but he's the only one who hasn't been out there. Braxton Jones and TJ Edwards have been kind of limited, but that seems to be minor things. And then the only news today on Thursday was that Kyler Gordon didn't practice. Again, no reason to think any of those are really injuries to be concerned with. But for the most part, you got 90 guys out there on the field, and we've gotten to see everybody.
Yeah, and it seems like that that I feel like everyone's being very precautious right now. Obviously, you're at the beginning of camp. You don't want something to snowball into something bigger. So, especially, the first week, you're just trying to get into stuff and you're trying to work some things out. If you're not feeling it, obviously we saw Keenan Allen and Mercedes Lewis already have a vet day. It's just pretty much just, there's no need to push it, especially for a team like the Bears who, last year they got injured a lot in training camp. So I'm sure Matt Eberflus and the rest of the coaching staff is kind of like, well, if you feel something, we can give you a break here or there just to make sure this doesn't turn into a major problem to start the year.
Yeah, and that's always the approach that these guys are going to take. These NFL teams, you're talking about players that you're investing millions of dollars in. Right. You don't want to test too much in August, and it's not even August; it's late July.
Right.
I cannot believe that they're playing a football game in a week. That's kind of crazy.
It is crazy, and it kind of goes into the whole conversation of they get on put on pads tomorrow on Friday, and then I think they have like a day off on Sunday or Monday, one of those 2 days. So you get 4 or 5 practices in pads before you're playing a football game. I feel like we need more time, just to kind of get into things. But obviously this is the NFL. This is how they do things. I know I listened in on Matt Eberflus today, and he was asked about whether Caleb Williams is going to play in that Hall of Fame game. That still seems to be TBD. So maybe it is just a lot of second string guys, third string guys who are trying to make the roster at this point, who are going to be playing on Thursday, and maybe we'll have to wait an extra week just to see Caleb Williams make his Bears preseason debut.
Yeah, Eberflus didn't really give much of an answer, just said that they've been talking about it in meetings and they'll probably make some sort of announcement in the next couple of days here. My hunch still tells me that he's not going to play. I feel like for that exact reason that you said, these guys are going to be in pads for a week, a handful of practices before that Hall of Fame game. Traditionally, or at least in recent years, a lot of these teams don't play very many starters in the Hall of Fame game.
Right.
And on top of that, they play the Houston Texans in week 2 in mid-September. I don't think that they want to necessarily, you're never going to give anything away in preseason, but it's kind of weird to play an opponent. Usually your preseason opponents are not teams that you're seeing in the regular season. And so that's a little bit of a weird wrinkle too. Guys, if you're watching on Twitter, click through to the YouTube link. You can join the conversation here in the comments. We will get to your Bears questions. We love answering your Bears questions. I know if you're joining us live, we're at a little bit of an odd time for us. We're doing this in the afternoon. We're usually morning people, but the training camp schedule has got us all discombobulated. So we're doing a show here in the afternoon. We're going to try to stick to try to get to you guys once a week here during training camp. Like I said, the schedule is a little chaotic, a little hectic, but we will do our best to give you guys a heads up. Do us a favor, hit the thumbs up on YouTube. That's a great way to support the show. Follow us on Spotify and Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, if you're listening after the fact. And if you are listening later, come join us live. It's fun. You can join the conversation here. We can get your questions answered. I think everybody's curious what Caleb Williams is looking like here in the early going. And, I'll just say that, it's kind of an extension of what we saw in the spring and kind of what I said. Like, he looks smooth. The throwing motion is really quick. And it's almost a little, I don't want to say jarring, but it's almost a little, it's really different compared to Justin Fields, who was obviously a bit lankier. His throwing motion felt slower. I haven't timed it. I don't have a timer out there at practice, but it seems like Caleb is much quicker throwing the football. It seems like he's, learning this offense, getting to know these receivers. I have been impressed with some of the defensive linemen. Javon Dexter again today with a tipped pass at the line of scrimmage. We've seen that several times already in this first week here. Montez Sweat had a nice play during a team session today. And so those guys are making it tough on Caleb. And I would say that the defense kind of had the upper hand today on Thursday. It was mostly red zone stuff they were doing. It was almost all in the red zone. They kind of lumped those together on a once a week or something. And Caleb looked good in 7-on-7, but then when they got those lines out there for team drills, it was a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
Michael, what did you see? You were out there a couple of days earlier this week. What did you see from Caleb?
I think we're seeing what we kind of told fans to expect heading into training camp. He's a rookie quarterback. Obviously, like you talked about. Obviously, he, it looks better coming out of his. He's just better at. It seems like he's better at the fundamentals. It seems like it seems smoother. But he's still going against an arguably top 10 defense in these practices and that kind of stuff. So, earlier this week I saw him. He led a 2-minute drive down the field. And he made some really good decisions, just, dump passes here, dump passes here. But then when it came time to get into the red zone, he, the first incompletion, he was rushed a little bit, so he just threw it away, which is a good decision. And then the next, couple throws that he had, just the defense did a good job of stopping it and blocking, the receiver from getting to the ball. So, we've seen good stuff in, 7-on-7s, like you said. We've seen some good stuff in 11-on-11s, but, it's just him. And I think this was a big thing that Matt Eberflus has been trying to emphasize this week is, I think for the Bears right now, the biggest thing is making sure that he feels comfortable with the huddle. And it seems like he's getting comfortable with there. The cadence was a big issue. I know in minicamp, Matt Eberflus said, it's still a work in progress, but it is much better than it was in minicamp. You can see that Caleb Williams really, worked on it over the, during that little break that they had there. And the cadence is much better. You saw Tevin Jenkins talk about it, Darnell Wright. That doesn't seem to be an issue anymore. So you're seeing improvements from Caleb in that aspect, which I think the Bears, think is the most important thing right now. Obviously, when he throws a deep pass to Tyler Scott wide open, that's really cool for the fans to see, impressive, jump pass throws, those are really cool things to see as well. But I think for the coaching staff, and I would say, Bears fans as well, the biggest thing right now is making sure that he knows how to control the huddle, knows how to call the plays, knows how to see different things. And once he gets that basic stuff down, then I think you can start getting into the minutia of, why is he throwing it, in front of, Jack Sanborn, that kind of stuff. You can get into that more a little bit once we get deeper into training camp. I think for right now, he's doing the things that he needs to do in order to make progress.
With a rookie quarterback, you really are working on those basics. We saw that with Justin a couple of years ago, and we're seeing that now with Caleb Williams. It's a really different ball game, calling the plays from college to the NFL, and that might change a little bit. Next year or this season, upcoming season, they're going to allow the the headsets in the quarterback's ear at the college level. That's never been a thing until now. And so maybe that will not be as big of a thing in the future, but for right now, at least in the present, that is a big adjustment for Caleb and for all the rookie quarterbacks. And so, yeah, that's really what OTAs has been about. That's really what these early days of training camp have been about. Somebody, I want to say it was Keenan Allen, said something last week to the effect of like, he's really impressed with how much Caleb has grown in that area, just calling out the play in the huddle. I remember during OTAs, there were a couple of times where they read out the play and you could tell something was off, and then they just reset and started over and did it again. And that's going to happen with rookies. And it's already like, that's something that I haven't been seeing this week. And so that's kind of a small little sign of progress in that area. And yeah, like that's where this has to start before you can really start talking about, oh, why did he change his arm angle on this or that throw? What was his thinking in going to this receiver versus that one? Like it's really that basic stuff. And I know that's not exciting. Nobody gets super excited about calling out the play. That's like really deep dive football stuff.
Right.
But that's really where these guys have to start.
And I feel like you're seeing some encouraging things as well. In 7-on-7, you kind of see it a little bit with an 11-on-11 too. But it's one of the biggest questions we had about Justin, Fields was, does he know when to get rid of the ball? Does he know when to, stop the plays, call it a day, and just say that it's over? And I think from what we've seen, in OTAs, what we've seen in the first week of training camp is that's been a big emphasis for Caleb Williams. And, whether that's Shane Waldron, whether that's Matt Eberflus, whether it goes all the way up to Ryan Poles, it seems like Caleb Williams is learning, like, he'll scramble. Like, he's not afraid to scramble. He'll run with the ball and that kind of stuff. But he also understands and is learning, like, the play is dead. Like, I can't make anything out of this. I'm going to try if I can. But, like, I feel like he's learning very quickly about when to call it a day. And I think that's going to be essential for a lot of rookie quarterbacks who, try to, play hero ball. I feel like that's one of the biggest critiques we saw about Caleb Williams coming out of USC, where he tried to do it all by himself at USC. And I feel like you're starting to see in this first week, obviously, I know it's not against, full pressure from the defense, which we can talk about. I know it's not pads. I know it's all that kind of stuff. But I think you're starting to see that the fundamentals of throwing it away are kind of coming in right now. And I think that's going to be essential for him to grow as he, progresses throughout his rookie year.
A similar thought as you're mentioning that, Michael, is I can't remember if it was the first or second day of practice. Gervon Dexter jumped up and blocked a pass at the line of scrimmage, and it went right back into Caleb's arms. He was he was aware and was able to corral the ball, and then B, he just took off running and beeline almost towards the sideline, maybe picked up a yard or two, maybe three, like nothing big, but just a really smart football play from your young quarterback. And that's kind of what you're saying. Like, he seems to make the smart plays. He's not afraid to check down. I've seen him checking down. Nobody's going to get excited about this, but I've seen him checking down at the running back or the tight end at the right times when there's nothing downfield. And that's what you want to see from your rookie quarterback. You have to have those basics before you can really start airing it out.
And I feel like those aren't the things we saw from Justin Fields, right? I think that's the biggest reason why maybe he wasn't able to find as much success in Chicago as much as everyone wanted to. Even going back to Mitch Trubisky, obviously, I know, I think people would say that Justin Fields is an upgrade over Mitch Trubisky. But even then, both quarterbacks just never learned to, when to call it a day. And they didn't know the basics. And I think that's kind of a big reason why you kind of see such an emphasis on this. And I don't know whether that's just Caleb being Caleb. And, I think that's a big thing that we've kind of learned about him, early on in this process, where a lot of guys have said, have come out and said, I don't know where all this diva stuff came from during the whole draft process, because that's not who Caleb is. And you see that, I think teammates could easily just be like, yeah, he's learning, he's doing a good job. But I feel like it says something that a lot of teammates are just saying, he looks a lot better, and it shows that he showed that dedication over the month that they were away from each other. I think that says a lot, and I think you could easily just have veterans be like, "Oh, he's a rookie quarterback. Sure, he's what the franchise hopes to be their cornerstone, but I don't have to make up things for this guy." And I don't think you're seeing that. I think you're seeing a lot of veterans being impressed by a rookie who is really taking this very seriously.
No, you can tell when guys are just like saying the right thing when they're asked about one of their teammates and they don't really have an answer, but they kind of come up with one. And That's not what's happening with Caleb. I mean, these guys are impressed by just the way he is in the locker room, and like he's a real dude, like that they can have a conversation with, and obviously the stuff that happens on the field speaks for itself, and we'll get to see more and more of that as we go along. But yeah, the guys aren't faking it with him. I mean, it seems like they really do respect him and the approach he's taking. Like, he's not taking any of this for granted. And I think that's really big. You can be the top draft pick and think you got it made, but you don't. You have to it's going to take work for Caleb Williams to reach some of those lofty goals he's mentioned. We sort of flip the script a little bit and start looking big picture at this offense. Again, it's a little bit hard to read into a whole lot when they're not in pads. The only real position battle that we've had is at the center spot. We've seen a little bit of both guys, Ryan Bates, Coleman Shelton. I'll say this, like, just watching, sometimes obviously we're out there and we're charting good throws by Caleb and all this stuff that happens during the plays, but it's sometimes just as valuable to watch what's going on the sidelines and after the plays. And it really seems to me like Ryan Bates is that quintessential vocal leader, that guy who's going to speak up after a team session when the offensive line comes off, and maybe the other guys move on to 7-on-7. And I heard him a couple of times being the guy who speaks up in that offensive line huddle. And that is, maybe not something that you can chart on the field, but that's something that I think probably gives him a leg up in this battle for the center spot.
And I think that's big because, I think Tevin Jenkins was the one who answered the question about this, but he was asked about, obviously coming in and kind of filling that void. And, Tevin said right away, like he's doing that right now. Bates is doing that. He's, taking that role pretty easily. He's communicating, he's doing a good job. And I think him and Shelton are doing a good job of, just competing. They're competing against each other, but also, Jenkins made it seem like they're kind of helping each other and they just want each other to succeed, which is obviously, at the end of the day, like all Bears fans care about, or whoever's the best center, stamping the ball to Caleb Williams. I think that's obviously the number one concern, but it is, kind of unique to see, at the professional level, you guys are fighting for your job, you're fighting for contracts, you're fighting for, your NFL life. And it does seem like the two guys are really working well off of each other. But yeah, I would agree. It just seems like based on, watching practice and from, other linemen who have talked about it, it seems like Bates has really filled in that, vocal leadership role pretty early on here.
And don't underestimate how important that is for NFL coaches.
Right.
That might seem like a cheesy thing, but it's not. Like, these guys take that very seriously. Lucas Patrick was that way. You could say whatever you want to say about his play on the field, but the Bears liked him because of his leadership qualities. And I think you have to have that to be a center. I mean, you're a guy who's calling stuff out. You're just as important as the quarterback in some ways, in terms of reading what the defense is doing in front of you, and in terms of like adjusting the coverages and moving guys up and down the line. That stuff really matters. And you have to be a vocal dude to take on that role. And if Ryan Bates can do that and be a better, physically be a better player than Lucas Patrick, I mean, that's an upgrade in that spot for your Bears offense. And that's exactly what you're looking for. Not to say that this is decided by any means. I mean, Coleman Shelton is still getting his reps, and it seems like they're going to keep flip-flopping for a little bit.
Right.
But I would think they're going to kind of solidify that probably soon-ish. I mean, I don't think you want to go too much into training camp before you make a decision there.
I think you want to do that. And, Matt Eberflus was asked that the other day, and he said, it's, I feel like all the coaches said that, but it's hard to make an evaluation without the pads on. You can't really see, what a player is doing, who a player really is. If you're just doing you're not doing walkthroughs, but just, without any contact and that kind of stuff, it's hard to tell, especially for the linemen who aren't really doing much. Like, you have like the other guys that are doing a lot, the secondary, the wide receiver skill players and that kind of stuff. But the Lions are pretty much just, getting up there, pressuring a little bit, and that's pretty much it. So I think we'll really start to get an answer here once the pads come on. And honestly, I think it's, I think it could happen pretty quickly just based on what we've seen, the role that Bates has as a vocal leader. And if he does that as well as, playing well on the field, then I think it's a pretty easy choice for the Bears, especially since they need to make sure that Caleb feels as comfortable as possible once he gets started here.
Other big picture offensive things just noted from the past week. I mean, maybe no surprise here, but everybody seems really impressed with Keenan Allen. I think Tyreek Stevenson today called him a magician out there, and the way that the smarts that he plays with. Tyreek was talking about how the offense will run a play and Keenan will run a certain route, and then maybe they'll come back to the play a little bit later on in practice and Keenan does something totally different. And right. That's what you expect from your 11-year veteran wide receivers. Those guys have been around the block and they know how to build off of previous plays. And that's something that you see these teams do during the season is give a team one look and come back and show the same look, but do something different. And, obviously the footwork with Keenan is just really, really impressive. He's a guy who's kind of stood out. I mean, DeAndre Swift is going to be a really good piece from the backfield. I think he's, like we said, he can catch the football. And if you're checking the football down, he's the type of guy who I think is going to be able to really elevate that aspect of your game. Michael, are there any other people on the offensive side that have caught your eye these first couple of days of practice?
I think, I want to touch on that running back point a little bit.
Yeah.
Going back, but I think the big guy right now, and I've heard a couple, defensive guys talk about him, is Rome Odunze. I think, we've hit on him a lot. I feel like ever since, they drafted him, we've talked about him obviously as being one player who we're looking forward to in training camp. But it just seems like he looks like the part, doesn't he? I feel like he seems like he can be Keenan Allen in 10 years, right? It seems like he's got the speed and he's got the wherewithal to know what he's supposed to be doing in certain situations. He's a big threat with his ability to kind of, spread the field, whether that's, up the middle, whether that's down the sidelines. I think he's going to be a really big threat for them. And, I feel like we keep wishing, illness toward Keenan Allen because we keep saying well, what if he's out and that kind of stuff? And obviously we're not, but if he does go out with an injury just because of his, recent record, I feel like Bears fans should feel pretty confident that Rome Odunze will do a good job filling in as number 2. And giving Caleb Williams a nice little target to look forward to. But going back to that running back conversation, I feel like at the time I was kind of surprised that they signed, DeAndre Swift, and obviously it was the first signing of all of free agency whenever tampering was over. And we were kind of like, oh, that's kind of weird. That wasn't the number one concern, but whatever. Based on what we've seen in training camp, and obviously we haven't seen any hitting yet, but he seems like he's going to be a key part to that offense, whether he's running the ball, whether he's catching it out of the backfield. He seems like he's going to be a threat. And I think that kind of opens up a really interesting scenario in the running back room where, I think we're all, focused on the center. We want to know who's going to be, rushing the quarterback opposite of Montez Sweat. But I'm really interested to see what they do with this running back room because we've got a lot of talented rushers. And I don't know how much room you have. Is there a threat to cut a guy? Is there a threat to, maybe leave someone off the active roster? I think because you're seeing a lot of good stuff from Swift. You saw some good stuff from Herbert for a couple of days. I think he's had a really good camp so far. I think Roschon Johnson has done some nice things. I think that running back room is really talented. And I think that might be a place where you're kind of crowded. Based on the other guys you kind of have behind them who might need to do more special team stuff as well.
Yeah. I mean, every day it kind of ebbs and flows, like one day you might be noticing Swift more, the next day it's another guy. And so, I don't want to read too much into any one single day, but I'll say Roschon was getting a lot of work with the ones today. I noticed him several times out there making some nice, a couple of nice catches. They were really working on the run game a lot today, as much as they can without the pads. We'll see that more and more as we go along here. But yeah, I mean, it makes you wonder, are they really going to have room for all three of those guys at the top for Swift, Khalil Herbert, and for Roschon Johnson? I would not expect any of them to get cut. But I certainly I would think that there'd be some value in Khalil. If they've moved off Khalil Herbert, there would be some trade value there. I'm not saying, it wouldn't be a ton, but you could probably get something. And running back is a position where teams always need somebody. Somebody will always get hurt. You will always need more running backs. Again, I don't expect that to happen. I'm just saying that's a possibility, depending on how these things play out. And sure, you could have injuries in your own running back room, and then it's a moot point because you need all these guys. But again, Herbert's like a guy in his last year of his contract. Does that make him expendable? Maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, look, I think sure you could be a little concerned that DeAndre Swift is on his third team before he turns 26. I'm not worried about that. He's coming off the best year of his career. Honestly, I think Philadelphia moved on simply because Saquon Barkley was available. I don't think it was because they didn't like DeAndre Swift. I think that the Bears really, really like this dude. I think that there's a possibility this could, he could be the workhorse. Obviously, every NFL team has to have multiple guys at this spot because that's kind of how it goes. But it wouldn't surprise me if you see DeAndre Swift getting a lot of the touches in this offense.
No, I wouldn't be surprised. And that goes back to your earlier good point. Like, injuries happen. So, obviously you should be happy that you have a deep, running back room, because eventually someone is going to get hurt. Someone's going to have a hamstring. Someone's going to have a quad, and they're not going to be able to rush. So I wouldn't say that you're kind of, in a rush to get rid of anyone, but I would agree that you have good talent there. And honestly, that might help you because then everyone is able to stay fresh and, they're able to really put together a really strong group. So, but yeah, the DeAndre Swift, signing was interesting. It was kind of like, why are we doing this? And, obviously if you watch Hard Knocks, you kind of saw, the whole Saquon Barkley thing. Obviously he's not very happy right now with the Giants. He didn't know he was being recorded, and that's a whole other thing. But yeah, I think Swift is going to be a big addition, and that's obviously one of the big guys that we've kind of been impressed with this training camp.
We got some of our regulars in the comments here. Robert saying, didn't know you guys came on at this time. Yeah, sorry guys, if you're jumping on late here. We are doing it at a weird time for us. I said earlier, we're morning people, and this is not the morning. The training camp schedule has caused us to adjust a little bit. I got to be out there. I'm usually leaving the house by 8:00, so I don't think we're going to be able to do morning shows during training camp, at least. Obviously, I think we'll probably have our same schedule, Monday, Friday once the season gets going. But we'll try to find a regular time here to do these training camp ones, because it's we got to adjust a little bit with the schedule. Yeah, Robert, I know Robert's over in the UK, so 11:55. That's a late one. Thanks for tuning in, man. We really appreciate that. Good to see Rick in the chat as well, and some of the other folks. We can do a couple of questions here. If you're watching on Twitter, click through to YouTube. You can join the conversation in the comments. We'll answer your Bears questions. We got a question here from Ken saying, do you think the Bears are going to sign a defensive lineman? We've kind of touched on this a little bit the last couple of times. I still do think they are going to look for a defensive end. So far, I mean, again, pads aren't on, so it's really early, but Javon Dexter's looked impressive. I don't necessarily think they need to add a defensive tackle, but I do think they are. I feel like they're going to look for a defensive end. Yannick Ngakoue is still out there, still available. Obviously, they liked him last year, and that's a guy they're familiar with. But I wouldn't be surprised if they do look to add a defensive end to go opposite Montez Sweat. I mean, DeMarcus Walker is a nice rotational piece. I don't know if you want him to be your starting defensive end.
Yeah, I am really interested about that. And you've seen Ngakoue. I think he's been he was at the Dolphins, and I think he was somewhere else as well. So I wonder if that is just something where, is he asking for more money than the Bears think that he's kind of worth? Because obviously he was really good last year. He obviously filled in for the Bears and kind of helped out, but maybe the Bears have their price and they're just kind of like, well, we don't value you at that price, and maybe it's not worth bringing you in for that, if we want to do that. But so that's kind of been an interesting thing. And then, you never know who gets cut during training camp. Maybe you try to drop a salary and you try to wait for him. Obviously, based on what Ryan Poles said during his media availability on Friday, he seemed fairly comfortable with what they have in the room. I think you have a lot of good pieces in the room. I think DeMarcus Walker is he's a good rusher. And I think, he's based on what he said this week, he seems more comfortable. He's not changing teams for the first time in 4 years. That always helps. I feel like people forget about that, but these players are humans, and that obviously pull on them when you're moving every year and you're trying to figure out a new system and that kind of stuff. So he could play a big role, but Man, I think the Bears have like roughly like $12 million in cap space left. I think you can get someone, whoever's available, because you need that defensive line to really get going. I think tackles, I think the Bears are fine with. I think Dexter's going to be really good this year, just based on what we've seen so far. Obviously, we haven't seen pads on, but you need someone opposite of Montez Sweat, because if you just get anything going opposite Montez Sweat, that takes that offense to a completely different level. That helps the secondary, that helps the linebackers, that helps your entire defense. So if you get anyone who can just generate some sort of pressure once Montez Sweat picks up two guys, I think that's going to be huge. So I think, they can like for what they have right now, but I think once the pads get on and you kind of see camp kind of move forward, I wouldn't be surprised to see them spend some of the cap space to bring in an experienced pass rusher.
Yeah, you're right on the money there too. $12 million in cap space. I mean, just enough to play around. Last year, they
Right.
got Yannick for a 1-year, $10 million deal. So, if you're in that range, like that's not going to be a problem. You want to leave a little bit of room to spare with these things in case something comes up during the regular season. Someone's going to get hurt. You might want a little bit of money to play with.
Yeah.
But, and I don't think, especially coming off an injury, like a guy like Yannick would probably not cost as much. But again, it sounds like he's, visiting with some other teams. So maybe it is just the price. Maybe they're ready to move on to somebody else. Darius says, how impressed have you been with Tyler Scott? Michael, I'm going to throw this one to you because you were there the day you were filling in for me when he made a big catch the other day, weren't you?
Yeah, that was probably the best play of the day. I think that was that, Tuesday or something like that. And I think, Caleb Williams just found him wide open down the sidelines. And he made a very nice catch. I will say he tripped and fell, so he didn't, go on to score. So maybe you would like him to, stay up and score on a very impressive throw. But it's going to be tough for Tyler because I think you have DJ, you have such a stacked receiving room where it can be hard to notice Tyler Scott sometimes. You got Velus Jones, who's also vying for some reps. And I think I saw that he made some impressive catches, today and over the past week. So it's a tough room to be in. So, I think a lot of people had a lot of hope for Tyler Scott. He showed a lot of great traits coming out of Memphis. Didn't see exactly what you wanted to see from him last year. So, and now he's got a tough room. So I think he needs to make plays whenever available. And you saw him make one of those plays, but I feel like we need to see more out of him.
Yeah, Velus Jones made a really nice catch in 7-on-7 for a touchdown today. Again, 7-on-7, take that with a grain of salt. You don't have the lines there, but that was a legit play. Like it wasn't one of those plays where the quarterback's sitting back there forever like that. There was a nice play between them to give Velus Jones a touchdown. I mean, at this point, I wouldn't expect him to be super usable at the wide receiver spot. I don't know. You would kind of just feel like that would have happened by now if it was ever going to happen.
Yeah.
But certainly, like the kick return potential there is a reason why he might still, he's still in contention to make the team. Let's see. Rick said he heard Gordon left practice. Yeah, we didn't see Kyler Gordon today. Again, they don't have to do any injury reports till the regular season, so we don't have the specifics on what exactly that is, but I did not see him there at all. Sometimes you'll see injured guys on the sidelines. I didn't see him at all. I don't know what that means, but Matt Eberflus said he had some tightness. It's probably just like a soft tissue thing. Hopefully we'll see him back in the next couple of days. He did break his hand last year, but that was in the regular season. I mean,
he did say the other day that he feels 100% on that aspect. So the hand's not a problem for him at all. I do think that on Tuesday, he was there, but he wasn't really doing much of the 11-on-11 or 7-on-7 stuff. So it didn't seem like Eberflus was that concerned either. So it does seem like that. It might be to kind of what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, where it might just be, let's be precautious right now. We're a week into things. Let's not make this into a bigger thing than it really is.
Jake, thanks for joining us. Jake says, is Waldron going to utilize 2 tight end sets with Kmet and Everett, especially in the red zone? I certainly think so. I mean, you look at his history, his 3 years as a coordinator in Seattle, I think Shane Waldron did a really good job using multiple tight ends. Each of the last 2 seasons, they had at least 3 tight ends with 15 or more receptions on the season, which doesn't sound like a lot, but you're talking about a third tight end getting 15 catches. It is a lot. And the Bears haven't had two. The Bears haven't had 2 tight ends do that in 3 or 4 years. It was the year Jimmy Graham and Cole Kmet were both doing that. I do expect them to use these tight ends well. That's why they brought Gerald Everett here. Obviously, Shane Waldron was Gerald Everett's tight ends coach when Everett was a rookie. Right. They know each other super well. They also had 1 year together in Seattle when Waldron was the OC. That's exactly why he's bringing him here. And so, yeah, you want to have those big targets in the red zone. That's going to help in that red zone area where we were just saying that Caleb kind of, not just Caleb struggled, but kind of the whole offense struggled today in practice in that red zone. That's why you bring those big body tight ends in there. That's exactly what they need in that spot. I think Gerald Everett, I put him, we did under the radar Bears players. I think it was my top 5. This was, earlier this month. And I had Gerald Everett as my number 1 under the radar Bears player, because I think he is like a guy who nobody's really talking about, who could actually play a really big impact on this team.
Yeah, I think, like you talked about, like you bring in an experienced tight end who has, who's done it before and kind of shown it before, where, you could have easily just been like, well, Cole Kmet's our tight end, like, we'll have, Mercedes Lewis and he'll catch a pass here or there, that kind of stuff, where it's very clear that you brought him here for a reason. And it goes to that that 2-set formation in the end zone, where it's like, if you have both of those big targets in the end zone, you got DJ Moore, you got Roma Dunze out there on the outs. Maybe you have Keenan Allen in there as well, if you can fit it. But I think that you brought him here for those specific reasons. You want to create as many opportunities for Caleb Williams to succeed. And that's what you have when you add Everett, whether that's, in the red zone or whether that's, just at the beginning of drives. I think you need to get as creative as possible. And, Everett brings a lot of opportunities for the Bears to do that. So, I think I would agree. I think, he kind of got signed and it was just kind of like, oh, like he'll be the backup, I guess, he has some experience here, but I do think that he can be a bigger, focal point of this offense, especially early. Cause I feel like tight ends are especially a quarterback's best friend. And I feel like that might be particularly useful at the beginning of the season.
Rick asks Santos or Taylor doing kickoffs. And it's a little bit like, I've seen a little bit of both of them at the same time. Like, I haven't seen them doing a whole lot of live kickoffs. Like they'll line up the kickers, but then they'll just throw the ball in the jugs machine and not actually do the kicking part of it. So I don't have a good answer for you yet on that. Michael, did you notice that the couple of days you were out there? Was there anybody specific who caught your eye in that regard?
I don't think it was anyone specific. I think they are just using the jugs machine right now. It seems like they line up the guys. They have like Cairo or whoever's doing it kind of pretend to, go through the motion of kicking it, but then they don't kick it and then just get it up there. But so I don't think you're going to get an answer there. I think you'll get an answer in the Hall of Fame game, honestly, which that will definitely be, watching them practice this and everything like that. I think that's one of the bigger things I'm looking forward to. And I think that's going to be one of the bigger things for, especially casual football fans, be like, what is this? Like, what are we doing? Like, this is going to look very different. Just watching them practice it and kind of get through the motions of, doing it and that kind of stuff. This kickoff is going to be very different. I think, it seems like it could lead to a lot of points. It could lead to some good returns. So good for Velus Jones. But I do think that's going to be a really fun thing for fans to finally see in real time, because even for us in practice, we see them kind of go through it like slow motion wise and that kind of stuff. And that's definitely one of the bigger things I'm kind of interested to see of, what does this look like in person? Because I don't think any of us really know exactly what to expect out of this kickoff stuff.
It's funny because we were out there for OTAs and mini camp, and we saw them practice it, and we obviously know that this rule is coming. And then one of the first days of practice over the weekend, they go line up at the far like 35 and 40 yard line. And for a second there in my head, I'm like, what are they doing? And I was like, oh, right. That's how we do it now.
Right.
So it is a little bit jarring for those of us who have followed football for a long time. Right. It's just a weird setup. It'll take some getting used to. hopefully it brings some more excitement back to the game. Just on the note, while we're on special team stuff, I'll say I've seen Rome Odunze doing a lot of punt returns. I've seen DeAndre Carter, of course, is back there. Dante Pettis, who's back this year, is working on punt return, and kind of a lot of those same guys on kick return. You got Valus and Khalil Herbert doing it, and as well as a little bit of DeAndre Carter. Tyreek Stevenson's maybe a little bit. He was joking with us today. He's like, "Well, I'm pretty far down the depth chart in the return game, but yeah, I'd love to do it." But those are some of the names that we've seen. Tyler Scott, another guy. They go out there. I mean, there's like 5 or 6 return guys. It's hard to really get a read on anything other than I'm always writing down who goes first, but I don't even know if that necessarily means anything.
No, it just seems like if you can, at this point, it seems like if you're fast and you can catch a ball, it seems like they're putting you back there just to kind of see what they have right now. And I feel like that's kind of what training camp is. And I see Rick doesn't seem too happy about, having, Rome Odunze as an option, which, I would agree with. Maybe it's not maybe you would want other players other than Rome, doing the return and that kind of stuff. But I feel like right now they're just getting guys used to it because, injuries happen. You might need to be placed in certain situations. So it's a good, it's a big cast right now. I think we'll probably know more about it once we get into more game action.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I saw Eddie Jackson go back there with that group of guys doing punt returns over the last couple of years, and it never happened in a game. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything, really. They're going to try out as many guys. They want as many guys to be able to do it as possible,
right?
Because you never know with injuries and stuff like that. Weird things happen. Michael, we're running out of time here, but I did want to touch on the pads are coming on Friday. We're going to get to see these guys hitting a little bit, the in the trenches especially. What are you excited to learn about this football team once the pads come on?
I think we're finally going to get a glimpse into what this team is. Obviously, you're not going to get the full answers, and I think I feel like the true time we'll finally get a full answers is when they do that joint practice with Cincinnati, because usually that's when you really start to see things. But, I feel like it's been the common thing. You don't really know how a player is doing until you put the pads on. You don't know you have no shot of knowing how the line is doing until you put the pads on. And that means you don't really know how well Caleb Williams is doing right now because, he can be doing some fun stuff on 7-on-7, even on the 11-on-11. He's not facing that much of pressure. But now, once the pads come on, Caleb Williams has to see what a real NFL, pressure is like. He's going to see it from different ends. He's going to see multiple different looks. And I think that's the first time we're going to see, is Caleb ready for this? Or are we going to need to see, a couple weeks, a couple games of practice and that kind of stuff? Because tomorrow kind of feels like, and I feel like everyone's kind of treating it as kind of like New Year's Day, where it's kind of like, all right, we're putting the pads on, we're ready to go. Like, this is when stuff really begins.
This is the first real practice.
Right. Like the week before was just like, all right, let's get into motion. Let's go through our sets. Let's do all that kind of stuff. And tomorrow just kind of feels like, all right, tomorrow we're playing real football for the first time since January. And now we're going to see what we really have, whether that's the offensive line, the defensive line, and the quarterback. And I think that should be really interesting.
We were talking with Jonathan Owens today about his trip to Paris to see his wife, Simone Biles. And he said something to that effect where, he was like, I don't know why everybody's making a big deal out of it. I'm really only missing one real practice. And I was kind of chuckling because I'm like, yeah, the practice before the game, before the Hall of Fame game, that's not going to be like a real practice. They're going to go pretty light there. And it's like, yeah, like these guys get it too. Like, I think it's fair to say like tomorrow's the first real practice. They got the pads on. They're actually going to be hitting. These guys know that the stuff without the pads is it's important. It's valuable. You're working on some of the basics, but you can't really do it without the pads. You can't do the running game without the pads. We're going to see I'm excited to watch some of the one-on-ones. I want to see of course, in the trenches, like that's going to be fun to watch. I'm excited to see how this offensive line looks against Montez Sweat and Javon Dexter and those guys when they can actually play some real football in there, because sometimes you see some guys get exposed when that happens, and you got to kind of regroup and get back to it. But I'm also, to my original point, excited to see the one-on-ones between the receivers and the defensive backs. I want to see Rome Odunze go up against Jalen Johnson and Tyreek Stevenson. And I want to see Keenan Allen go up against some of those guys and what that looks like, because we don't get a whole lot of that until they put the pads on. And then you're getting the one-on-ones from both the big fellas on one side of the field and the receivers and DBs on the other. That's always really fun. I know that doesn't, if a guy catches a ball in a one-on-one, it doesn't really mean anything, but it's really fun to watch the competitiveness in those sessions. And you kind of learn a little bit about some of those guys when you're watching that.
And I'm really curious to see, we've been talking all offseason about how mouthy the defense has been. Tempers can flare pretty quickly once you put the pads on and once you get into the heat of motion. Obviously, there have been plenty of, summer scraps and, some huddles and that kind of stuff. It's been a whole offseason of chirping and that kind of stuff, and you're not going to start a fight when we don't really want to start a fight regardless. But when you're not wearing pads, it's kind of like, okay, like whatever, we're kind of going at this at half speed. But when you got the juices pumping and you're ready to go and you're ready to hit someone, things could get interesting. So I'm really curious to see whether, and I think Billings talked about this earlier this week, where someone on the defensive line talked about how the defense is trying to be mouthy to get Caleb and the offense ready. And I'm curious to see whether they're going to be able to break the offense, whether that's Caleb, whether that's an offensive lineman, because that's something that they're going to see all season long. That's something that Caleb is going to see all season long. And if they can prepare him for that right now, I think that will really prove dividends during the regular season.
Yeah, look, we see it like when you watch shows like the Netflix quarterback receiver, whatever, you get Hard Knocks. Certainly, like you see the way that these guys talk on the field. Like that's a real aspect of the game that you don't really account for, is like the stuff guys say in between plays, just trying to get in your head. And yeah, so that is valuable for the rookies, for Caleb Williams and those guys. That's something that they got to get used to. Certainly that's at all levels of football. I think that's going on, but this is the NFL, and you got to prepare your rookie quarterback in every possible way.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And I think it'll be really fun to see, how he does with that. I think that's the biggest thing right now, right? You can do all the things, you can do the classroom work, you could do all that kind of stuff. Now is the time to see whether Caleb can take that next step and whether he's willing, whether he's going to grow from it. I think that's the biggest thing. He's going to make mistakes. I'm sure tomorrow the defense will be ahead of the offense, because that's just how it always is in any aspect of football, any level of football. But does Caleb continue to grow? And I think that's going to be a big thing to watch here the next couple of weeks.
Guys, if you're watching live with us, do us a favor, hit the thumbs up on YouTube. That's a great way to support the show. Follow us on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Like I said, our schedule is going to be a little funky during training camp. We'll try to get semi-regular here. I just off the top of my head, Michael, I think we can probably plan on doing one the morning after the Hall of Fame game, if that works for you. I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about after seeing, hopefully seeing some of the Bears players that are going to be consequential this season.
You hope. If it might be a bunch of third strings, then we can do some deep cuts and that kind of stuff. But we'll definitely have something to talk about, whether it's a whole week of practice or whether it's the Hall of Fame game. I think we'll be in a much different spot than we are right now.
Yeah. Be sure to head to shawlocal.com for the latest Bears news. I'm Sean Hammond. You can find me on X at Sean_Hammond. He's Michael Dwojak. He's at mdwojak94. This has been the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.